What if I told you the most practical vehicle of the 1930s was made of wood, powered by pedals, and had less horsepower than your lawnmower? Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a moment to appreciate a vehicle that defied every known law of horsepower, practicality, and aerodynamics, and somehow still managed to leave a mark on automotive history. No, it didn't race at Le Mans. It didn't climb the Alps. It barely climbed a curb. But the 1935 Velocar Camionette Motoriseé was one of the most earnest attempts to put post-war France on wheels, or at least wooden ones. Now, before we roll on, hit that subscribe button to join us for more stories about strange, forgotten, and delightful machines from the dusty corners of the automotive past. In a France still recovering from World War I, when the average citizen couldn't afford a car or even a powered bike, engineer Charles Mochet created something revolutionary in its own absurd simplicity. The Velocar. It started as a four-wheeled pedal cycle, built because Mochet's son was a little too daring on his regular bicycle. Safety was the goal, and Mochet delivered, sort of. By the time we get to 1935, the Velocar had evolved into various formats, including the Camionette Motoriseé, a light utility version with a flatbed rear and a feisty little two-stroke motor. It was intended for deliveries, family use, and anyone who didn't mind arriving late to everything. Technically speaking, it was powered by a two-cylinder, two-stroke Stanley engine displacing just 30 cc and delivering a hair-raising 1.8 horsepower. That's not much, but it was more than zero, which is what the original pedal-only versions offered. The transmission? A chain drive system, direct to the rear axle, because gears were a luxury, and this wasn't about luxury. The camionette's body was crafted from wood, wrapped in a leatherette-like waterproof material called moleskin and bolted together with the kind of care typically reserved for rowboats and bookshelves. Its length was 7 feet 11 inches, 2.4 meters, width just over 3 feet 3 inches, 1 meter, and height approximately 3 feet 11 inches, 1.2 meters. Weight? Low. Very low. Somewhere in the range of a few hundred kilograms, depending on whether the driver ate lunch. Top speed hovered somewhere between 10 and 15 kilometers per hour, 6 to 9 miles, but wasn't built for speed. It was built for movement, any movement, in a time when movement itself was a luxury. Braking was mechanical, using drum brakes on the rear wheels operated by hand levers. Steering? Direct and simple. Suspension? Let's just say every bump was part of the experience, and yet there was something clever in its minimalism. You didn't need oil changes, you didn't need a driver's license, and you certainly didn't need to spend a fortune. Back in the late 1920s and early 30s, a Velocar could cost between 2,500 and 3,900 French francs, which translated to about $118 to $185 USD at the time. In today's money, that's roughly $3,000 to $4,000 US for an entire vehicle with wood. Most camionettes started out as pedal-only and were later motorized by companies like VEL, turning these quirky contraptions into something vaguely resembling a powered vehicle. And while noisy and crude, these motors got the job done, especially for small-scale deliveries or long rides on rural roads where horses had better things to do. The finest example of this particular model was sold at the R.M. Sotheby's Bruce Weiner Microcar Museum auction in 2013 after a meticulous restoration. The wood was rebuilt, the moleskin rewrapped, and even the wheels were individually respoked. It retained its original pedals, but featured the classic pre-War II motor conversion, complete with a tiny cylindrical fuel tank inside the cargo bed. The hammer fell at $14,950 USD, which at the time translated to about 13,800 euro a year. That may seem steep for a glorified wooden box on bicycle wheels, but for collectors of early microcars and oddities, it was a gem and one of the best preserved Velocars in existence. Now look, we're not saying this was a perfect machine, far from it. It was slow, noisy, limited in function, and about as aerodynamic as a wardrobe. But I think what stands out, what deserves a nod of respect, is that it met people where they were. It wasn't trying to impress, it was trying to help. And in that modest goal, it succeeded. If this little story made you smile or at least go, "Huh, I didn't know that," consider sponsoring our channel. And a special thank you to our current sponsors. Without you, we'd be pushing these stories uphill barefoot on wooden wheels.